Good afternoon, you ruddy lovely people. You are all very welcome along to the Lilywhite Lane YouTube channel. I hope that you're all having a smashing day and week wherever you are in the world and whatever you are planning to get up to. And I'm going to be bringing you all a bit of a different kind of video today because I've seen a few articles in a couple of different newspapers that have caught my eye. The first one was in the Daily Mail last week, and it was pretty scathing of the winners of the Europa League getting into the Champions League, talking about it putting a bad name on the Champions League. This top competition can have a team in it that might have finished 16th, 17th the season previous. They were talking about Manchester United, and they were obviously talking about Spurs. And then I read an article in the Telegraph yesterday that was pretty scathing again of the winners of the Europa League getting into the Champions League and saying, Nottingham Forest are outstanding. They're a team that deserve to get into the Champions League, yet Spurs or Manchester United can when they've had horrific domestic seasons. I don't understand why we're suddenly discounting the fact that both teams, despite how horrific our domestic seasons have been, have had really, really good European seasons up to this point. And to get into the Europa League, you need to finish, as I say, from 5th, or not this season. This season it'll be, I believe, 6th to 7th, but it's normally 5th to 6th. So you have to get into the Europa League from finishing 5th or 6th. And in the next season, you have to win the competition, a competition with teams that finished just outside the top places in other leagues. And then you qualify for the Champions League through that. I don't think that's unfair. I don't think there's anything about that format that needs to change. One of the things that I didn't like about the Champions League was that the teams who would drop out would go into the Europa League. Teams are earning another opportunity to win a European trophy that they haven't qualified for yet. Us and Manchester United, despite how bad our domestic seasons have been, we've earned our right to be in the Europa League. We've earned our right to be in the position we are in right now. And if we go on to win the Europa League, we would therefore earned our position to be in the Champions League despite how bad our domestic seasons have been. I do understand the thing of it makes the Champions League look bad, but the Telegraph yesterday saying Forest deserve to get into the Champions League. If we want to present the Champions League as this just the top teams competition, top class, then shouldn't it be the top 2 in every league? It's called the Champions League, and there are 3 teams in the top 5 leagues that don't win the title, that are champions and still get into it. In the Premier League, there's going to be 5 spots. The 5th place team in the Premier League this season will get to go into the Champions League. What are they champions of? Champions of finishing 5th? So I don't understand how the Telegraph can say Forest deserve to be in the Champions League but Spurs don't. When Spurs qualified for Europa League, this European competition, by finishing in the places we need to last season and have had a really, really good European run. I think Forest deserve to be in the Champions League with the way the format is, and I don't think the format needs to change. I think if you just had the best team in every country in the Champions League, it would be a much, much smaller competition. Far more small. And still, you'd get champions from Norway, you get champions from Scotland. No disrespect to these leagues, but 4th place, 5th place in the Premier League, as it's going to be this season, are going to be better than those teams. So I think it's a bit hypocritical to from the Telegraph to come out and say Forest deserve Champions League but Spurs don't, when you've got to win a European trophy that you've got to qualify to get into the season before to be in the Champions League, whereas Forest are getting into it, as I say, by not winning anything. I don't really understand it. I believe Forest should be in it, and I believe the winners of the Europa League should be in it. So I don't understand how you can look at one and say, Forest deserve to be in the Champions League, but Spurs or Man United don't if they win the Europa League because they've had bad domestic seasons. I think that's utter nonsense. And where was this conversation a few years ago? Why is it that this conversation is popping up now with Spurs? Because we've got a chance to win a trophy, despite how horrific our season's been, how mismanaged the squad's been, how bad Ange Postecoglou has been. We've got a chance to create history. We've got a chance to get our biggest achievement, technically, since 1991. I would class it as bigger than the 2 Carabao Cups. We've got a chance to win that trophy that the papers constantly banter us about. The people who aren't Spurs fans at the workplace, at school, at college, banter us as fans about. And I don't think they like the fact we can achieve that. So we win the Europa League. The conversation all of a sudden turns to, should the winners of the Europa League get into the Champions League? Why weren't we having this conversation a few years ago when Sevilla got into the Champions League? Everyone just went, Sevilla are absolute experts at winning the Europa League. Yeah, but they were mid-table that season. Granted, we're worse than them in our league, but they were mid-table. They won the Europa League. They got in. Atalanta, did they do well in the Champions League this season? Not necessarily. They got into it by winning the Europa League. You know, I don't understand it. I don't understand why this is suddenly coming up. Frankfurt won the Europa League a few years ago. Were they anything special in the Champions League? No, they weren't. You know, where's this notion suddenly coming from? Villarreal are an exception, to be honest, but I don't understand why, when Spurs have a chance of qualifying for the Champions League through the Europa League, the conversation all of a sudden turns to the quality of the Champions League isn't good enough because the winners of the Europa League are getting in. You know, where was this conversation year after year? Is the Champions League as a competition, as I say, does it have the quality that it used to? That's a conversation for a different day. And if we do qualify for the Champions League, would I really care? No. If we win the Europa League, personally, I'm not speaking for any other Spurs fans, I will be focusing more on the fact that we've won a European trophy than it's been used as a qualification process for the Champions League. Are we going to win the Champions League? Not a chance. It's a money grab for Enoch and Levy. It's more money lining their pockets. I don't care about it. We've got no chance of winning it. Whether we keep Ange, bring in a new manager, we haven't got the quality to even compete with the best teams in that competition. But we would have earned our way into it by winning a European trophy, beating some very good teams along the way, and qualifying for it the season before by beating some very good teams along the way in the league, you know? I don't think we do well in the Champions League, but I think you've got to give the players and the club something to strive for in the Europa League. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, as fans, a majority of us care more about the trophy than the Champions League qualification, but most players dream of playing in the Champions League. So that's another thing to strive for that leads to the quality of Europa League games being better. They're more being on the line, because if you take away that qualification for the Champions League, what's the difference to the Conference League? You know, the Conference League, I don't agree with that. I think it's nonsense. People say it gives more opportunities for teams to get into Europe. What, Chelsea? Like, they haven't been in Europe for ages. Their fans have been crying out for some European football against Liga Warsaw, haven't they? Look, it's an interesting topic. A few papers have pointed it out. I want to get your guys' thoughts on it, so please do comment them down below in this video. Take care, guys. Thank you for watching. Come on, you Spurs. Have a good one. Toodle pip. Catch you later.